You want to open with prayer?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a little bit loud here. Would somebody like to open in prayer? Maybe one of you young people, maybe? Anybody in that row? You want to come up and open up? Go ahead. I'm getting a little bit of hot feedback. You can speak to this. What's up?
All right. Heavenly Father, we come to you right now. We thank you for this glorious day that you've given us, for this glorious holiday that you've given us, and for this wonderful time that we get to have with each other, Father. And we come to you and we just ask that during this day that you bless us, you enlighten us to your word, and that through everything we do today, that it all glorifies you and all brings honor to you, so we can be your hands and your feet, Father. In your holy precious name, amen.
Amen.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Does somebody want to look at Isaiah 33:18 and read it? Can we have that available? Anybody got that?
We're getting there.
Okay.
Where is he who counts? Where is he who weighs? Where is he who counts the power?
Okay, does everybody hear that?
No.
Can you project a little louder?
Your heart will meditate on terror. Where is he who counts? Where is he who weighs? Where is he who counts the towers?
Okay, now that has to be taken in context, but I don't know if anybody else has a different translation, but they're all going to be pretty similar. Where, something about your heart will meditate on terror. Another translation says your heart will muse in dread. Isaiah 33:18. So if you read the context, it's like big trouble coming. So we could look at that in the context of saying, well, look at our news reports, not only in the States, but in the whole world. I mean, isn't there seeming to be a lot of meditating on terror? Or to muse is where you get the word amusement, or the muse. It's a Greek deity thing about inspiration for art and music, right? And so like, how much of movies, of TV, of internet is all being terrified? What does it mean? Let me ask you. What do you think it means when he says, where is one who counts, where is one who weighs, and where is one who counts the towers? What towers? What do you think that means? Anybody else have any big ideas about what that might be in reference to? Again, this is totally out of context. It's like
Watch
guard towers.
Some stature of people in the community, perhaps. Leaders, teachers.
Teachers and leaders? Where's one who counts the
The
teachers?
towers, the Magadolian, they could be not a building, but a person of stature and tallness, Gadol.
Can anybody hear what she's saying? I don't think so. She's saying that the word gadol is what's used here, or migdal. There's a mem in front of the word gadol, and that it might mean basically big shots, leaders, important people.
Well, people doing a good job, leading well. Count them up.
Okay,
Is this
how do you
negative?
count that? What does that mean?
No more shall you see the barbarian. It's people who have the wisdom invested in them to be towers in the faith. How about that?
Is that Sefer?
Say that again.
People who have been invested with wisdom, and they are towers in the faith.
Towers, people who are invested with wisdom in the towers of faith. What good would it do to count them? Where's one who counts? Where's one who weighs? Where's one who counts the towers? Yes.
So, your heart meditate on territory. If they're meditating on terror, they're not relying on the Lord for their safety and their about to happen. I think where does he who counts? The Lord who counts all stars, the numbers all there, and then where is that person in your life if you're meditating on terror? What if all there are the prayer? If you're not
So, again, I don't know if anybody can hear, but for the sake you're saying that it's part of the curse to be afraid. It's like you'll run in fear at the sound of a rustling leaf. You'll flee though no one pursues you. That was one of the stipulations, I think it's in Leviticus 26, or perhaps Deuteronomy 28, what's going to happen. Yes?
I was going to say, maybe it's for like, the one who is counting is the one who knows where these people are.
Knows which
where the
people.
righteous are, or knows where the people who are of stature and knowledge is, so that they can save the city.
If you,
Eric, what we can do with these people, I can we can pass.
Oh, has the microphone around.
Hand the microphone when
okay, sure. If you look at the verse in context, so I'm trying to do a couple things here. One, they say, well, context is everything, right? Like property, location. So where does this show up? But if you look at chapter 33 of Isaiah, it starts off in verse 1 saying, woe to you, pillager, but you have not been pillaged, traitor who has not been betrayed. When you finish pillaging, you will be pillaged. When you end your treachery, they will be treacherous with you. You say, well, who's he talking about? I mentioned yesterday about this word mishpat, which is a balancing of scales. And there's something about Yahweh's personal occupation. Once you notice this, you can see it all through the scripture. This is one place where he says, just because it looks like you're getting away with something, you're not. And if you see an open door to do something, it's like, gee, nobody's stopping me, like the pillager, the traitor. And you go in and you take advantage of a situation. Look, I got away with it. And Yahweh says, it's all a matter of timing, and when the time comes, everything you did is coming back on you. Good for good, righteousness for righteousness, evil for evil, the same measure you use. And one of the things I don't have time to get into is, which I can write up and email you guys or whatever if you want, is a whole list of verses which qualify all this stuff I'm talking about. In terms of Yahweh saying, Israel, you're the apple of my eye, all my attention is on you. I've given you everything, but because you scorned it and betrayed it, fine. Called in your enemies to come and ruin it. The Piratzim, the pirates, they break things, they have no regard. But when I'm done with them, then I will restore my favor to you, and they're going to get whacked for everything they've done to you. It's like, that's kind of a weird thing. He opens the door and he lets them in, and then he gets mad at them for doing it. That's the way it's set up. Well, what is it that turns him around? Is us turning around. So what he's saying here in Isaiah 33 is, regardless of who it is, what country, what power, what person, you're going to have to, as they say, sleep in the bed you make. You know, whatever you do to somebody else is going to come back. And so I had heard in 1967, a Palestinian charter, when they formulated their government, they wrote a charter. A friend showed me this on the internet years ago. I don't even know if it's still there. They said, we know, I'm paraphrasing, we know that the Jews have divine favor. They're his people. But it's conditional for them doing righteousness, which they don't. Now this is the Palestinians speaking. I'm saying this is written up in their governmental charter. And they said, so we know that we have an open door to come in and loot them and smash them and kill them and steal everything we can from them while the door is open. So let's have at it. But we also know that the door is going to close one day. They believe these words, and they're taking advantage of the situation because that's the only shot they have. So when Yahweh says, I've turned my back on you, well, the New Testament says, I will never leave you or forsake you. As we read further, what I've found is there's verses which specifically say this, that his regard of us is a mirror of our regard of his word. And he says, the enemy coming at you is your own finger in the mirror approaching yourself until it touches the mirror. The enemy that comes against you is your own finger in the mirror. And it's a picture of our regard of his word, very literally. Which means for us to be sitting here, listening about his word, is the only way to turn anything around. And it's like if you see a big, ugly monster coming at you in the mirror and you go, that's my enemy. How do you change that enemy? How do you make it go away? No, think about this. Think about what I said. It's all, if the enemy in the mirror is a picture of your attitude towards Yahweh's word, and it's just a big, terrible face screaming, I'm going to get you. How do you change that image?
Change yourself.
Change your own expression. It's your face in the mirror that you're looking at. And it changes instantly. It's not even something that, yeah, eventually it'll turn around. It's like, it's your expression. And so what I'm trying to say is that the way that you read Scripture, if you, and this is what I found to be the case, is that what you expect to see, you'll see it all over the place. But if you change your expectation, you'll see that all over the place. That's just the way it seems to work. So if you think, hey, all this stuff in the Old Testament is done away with, we don't need it. If you can't trust in your own works for salvation and blah, blah, doesn't matter. Then you'll read all these verses that seem to qualify that perspective. But then if you happen to say that he says, you don't listen to me when I speak, I won't listen to you when you speak, well, your enemies are tearing you apart. And if you turn back and listen to me, these very words I command you this day, Deuteronomy 30, then everything will turn around. And then you read in the Song of Moses, Deuteronomy 32, and he says, Moses, write this song and make sure that people learn this. Have you ever gone through and looked at that song? Has anybody ever done that? What's the upshot of the whole thing?
You turn to me, I'll turn to you.
He's basically saying, big trouble's going to happen. And it's your own fault. And people are saying, gosh, we have this horrible God. It's just this monster. And then he goes on to say, really? Really? You believe in him? It's us. Daniel said the same thing. Nehemiah said the same thing. When you look at it, he's remained faithful to his word every step of the way. He said, I'm going to show you righteousness, truth and kindness, balanced scales of justice. That's the way it works. Emet and Chesed is truth and kindness. It's mentioned many times. And then Mishpat and Zadikah is the balanced scales of justice. Right ruling is translated, and doing the right thing. Those four things seem to be the preeminent basis of his entire kingdom. And he says, so the Torah instructions show you how to play that out. To the extent that you betray those standards, that quality aspect of his character and nature, is to the same extent that we tip the scales, and just like water flows downhill, the same type of trouble is going to flood into us. It's a mechanical system. I know somebody else who says that it has nothing to do with mechanics, which it seems like a machine. It's a flow, it's a fluid. Well, it's actually both. When we understand that Yahuwah invented, designed, built the world to work as a system, a simple system, then we can then live, operate, think, work into that for the sake of the same word for righteousness, Zadikah, is victory, deliverance, and salvation. But the only reason I know that is because I'm looking in the dictionary. If I look in the scripture for the translation I've been handed, I can't see that. It's just not even there. So this thing in Isaiah, he goes on to say, Yahweh, grant us favor. We have hope for you. And then he goes on, here's a verse 6. The faith of your times will be the strength of your salvations, wisdom and knowledge. Fear of Yahweh, that is treasure. So we're talking about yesterday this treasure hunt. He goes on, and then he, verse 14, sinners were afraid in Zion, trembling seized hypocrites. Which of us can live with the consuming fire? Which of us can live with the eternal conflagration? In Jerusalem, they say it's the city which devours its inhabitants. That's what it's called. Wave after wave of enemies coming in and stealing it from one another, just century after century after century. Everybody takes the city and go, woo, we got it. And another country comes in and just smashes them. And they say that the streets Yeshua walked is 30 feet below the surface level. The Via Dolorosa, oh, he walked on these streets and saw these buildings. It was 30 feet down. Jerusalem was smashed and built and smashed and built and smashed and built. And yet that's the city of our God. That's what they say. And it's like, just for what it's worth, I will try to always use English words referring to what people say regarding a different identity than Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahuwah our Elohim. And so I'm trying to govern my own language to speak his words, the Kadosh tongue, Shafak Kodesh. Interesting thing. Have you ever heard of the phrase Lashon Hara? The word hara, like Boko Haram over there in Nigeria, that means evil. Or, Ra. You talked about that. Resh Ayat. Boca's mouth, like in Spanish. Lashon is the word for tongue, but sheen is also teeth. And it means different, variant, changed. It's like a football scrimmage line where you see the two teams lined up and they're coming at each other. So the same word shanal is like, it means dental work, where your teeth are lined up, top and bottom, as well as from side to side. So Lashon is languages which have been changed, like at the Tower of Babel. So Lashon Hara is basically evil language, evil tongue, evil. Okay. But when it seems like, my wife noticed this, that whenever Hebrew is talked about, they don't use the word Lashon. They use the word Shafat, which is Shin, Pei, Hey. The Lashon is Lamed, Shin, Vav, Nun. Why would they use that for the word lip, language, or tongue when referring to Hebrew? This lower one, Lashon, means different or variant, but the word Shafat also means smooth, like the bank of a river, somebody's bald head, or windswept, so it's where the wind has blown all the leaves and everything away, so it's clear. And then it also means to be cured from sanity, or from insanity, brought back to sane. Sorry, cured from sanity. That's what we're doing here, Black Valley. It's to recover your health. It's like, wait a minute. So my take on reading Hebrew is not just to look at the translation that I've been handed, but look at the dictionary and dissect the words and reverse engineer the spelling of it with the hypothesis, based on that experience I had with Ayin Dalet, Ayin Tav, which I mentioned yesterday. The hypothesis is, because this is Yahuwah's language, and he constructed it, then if we look at the letters and the way they're composing a word, we're looking at his mind, the way he thinks, because he's the one who put this together. Just like we said, the word pene, face, can be described as word. Do I need to clear that, find that for anybody? Does anybody did not hear that? Okay, the word pene, penun yod, pe is a mouth that opens, nun is something that jumps out like a fish out of the water, and yod is a working hand that is yours, you grab hold of it. So the word face, pe nun yod, just a reiteration here. You got pe, there's the mouth, nun, the fish that jumps out, and yod, the working hand that makes it possessive because the yod is the suffix. So it's something of your own that jumps out of your mouth that makes something happen. Words. Yahweh spoke and it existed. But that word pene is translated face. So the benefit of looking at Hebrew and the word pictures of Paleo Ancient is to say, this is the way Yahweh thinks. Not only this is the way he thinks, but it's dealing with his face. Like Helen Keller was blind and she couldn't hear, but she could, touch somebody's face and get who they are. How important is this?
Very.
If this truly is the word that Yahweh invented, the alphabet, in John 1:1, that's my own conjecture. People are free to disagree. But if this is the word, then this is the source, like the periodic table of elements in chemistry. Such as we can find scientifically, everything, at least on Earth, maybe the rest of the universe too, is composed of those specific elements. And if it was composed of something else, we can find it, we'll add it to the chart. This is the table, the list, the index of the source that everything is made from in the physical realm. So this list of alphabetic letters is exactly the same thing. It's the source of everything made, not only in the physical realm, but also as we've been given. You might call it the spiritual realm or the invisible realm too, because it has to do with psychology. Our brains work in a certain way. We think in certain patterns based on this alphabet. And if you can read the alphabet, which is a whole other study, you can find that it's a model for clear thinking psychological processes in categorization. I mean, literally, you can look at this Mishkan pattern and realize it's a way to process any event that happens and end up okay instead of going nuts. And there's something about the Hebrew language which restores to health and brings back sanity. So one reason for learning Hebrew, thinking about this stuff, pondering his letters, is to become fit as a human to its highest potential. You train athletically so that you get your body fit. If you think Hebrew, I'm convinced, if you learn Hebrew stuff, you become fit in all the other ways at the same time. One of the first things he says is, stop eating those things and stop working on those days and start changing your language. Where does he say change your language? Zephaniah 3:8. One day in the future, he's going to restore a pure tongue. You can speculate whether or not that's Hebrew, but every other language is different, variant, morphed, mutated, lashon. But Hebrew is shafar. Okay, that's just a qualifier.
Sir,
Yes?
would you mind me asking a question?
Oh, absolutely. Just so you know, this is supposed to be a question and answer, but I wanted to tell you why I'm invoked Isaiah 33. Go ahead with your question.
Wait, the microphone, can we?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Mike.
Paul, and I think it's in,
No, here. Go ahead and speak in this. Go ahead.
Paul in Ephesians talks about he gave us a sound mind. I think it's in Ephesians. And does this correspond to what you're saying? So they were learning Hebrew, the Gentiles were learning Hebrew, and now the Holy Spirit was giving them a sound mind. Would that make sense in relationship of what you're saying?
Yes. Now, that being said, I'm not saying that everybody else is crazy, and I'm not saying that there's something wrong with you if you don't learn Hebrew, or that you're going to go to hell if you don't learn Hebrew. I'm not saying that. But we're talking about a treasure hunt. And what I'm saying is, if it says, it's Isaiah 33, that, where did I read that? Well, anyway, one who, verse 6, the faith of your times will be the strength of your salvations. It doesn't even make sense in this English. What I do with this English is I use it like a buoy out on the ocean. The ocean just is this big, vast expanse of all the same. You don't have any clue where you are. But if you see a buoy, oh, there's an indicator. So you go over there to the indicator, and then if you want to see what's down under the ocean, you put on your gear and you go diving. Okay, the English is a buoy. The depth of what's there is in the Hebrew. And you can put a snorkel mask on, that's kind of like how I see the modern Hebrew, but if you want to put on your tanks and go down in there and get right in there with it, that's the paleo, the pictures, and then you can see so many layers and depths. When he originally gave us a sound mind, great. But then everybody went nuts before the flood. Were they speaking Hebrew? If it was the original language, they would. So I'm not saying that, gee, that'll necessarily keep you on the right track. It's still your heart teaching and learning his ways in our orientation. But what I'm saying is there's more in Hebrew than any other language. But it's what you make of it. Okay, you can't look at Israel right now today and say, look, everybody's speaking Hebrew, they're doing everything wonderfully. It's like, yeah, there's a lot of problems. Not that we're any better than them, and we'd probably be doing the same kind of problems, I would expect. But what I'm saying is, There's something about Hebrew that's worth our while. So, when this says the faith of your times, the word faith, it's aleph, mem, vav, nun, tav, amamot. That's the word that Jeff was speaking about. It's a variation of where we get the word amen, which is to be faithful. Like I said, the Marines' logo, Semper Fidelis, always faithful, always doing what we said, and Abraham was found. So is he saying what you believe, or is he saying the way you do what he said faithfully is where your strength is? See, I'm modifying the interpretation of the verse a little bit without even really getting into the Hebrew. And if we're going to sit here and say, let's really look at this verse, I'd write it down just as a little bit of a clue. I mean, you're welcome to take looks at my notes, but there's just page after page of trying to analyze these various scripts. You know, it's just, I don't know if you can see, but it's no easy task. It's just thousands of hours worth of work, but word for word, letter by letter, it's worth the while. Okay, so here's my point. Going back to that one verse that we read, where is one who your heart will muse and dread? I think it could be translated also, your heart will expel terror. Wait a minute, that's the opposite. Does it say you will entertain yourself in fear and trembling and terror and or will your heart expel terror? What does that word mean? Quite often in Hebrew, one word spelled the same way can have the opposite meaning. Which is one reason why you've got so many different English translations. For example, the word Pesach means to jump over, right? Now, if you watch gymnastics, some of those guys can jump and flip and spin, and before they land, it's like, wow, quite a leap. That's Pesach. But Pesach also means to be lame, so you can't even hardly walk. It's like, well, which is it? It's both. In Hebrew, a lot of times the same word can mean both things, so it was up to the translator's subjective discretion, their own personal idea of, gee, what is this talking about? And that's the way they'll translate it, which is why we have so many translations. That's just what happens. Besides of which, my cousin works with the Holman Study Bible down there in Tennessee, and it says right there in the front page, publishers must change a certain percentage of the rendering in order to get copyright so they can sell it and make some money. That's just business. Any Bible you get has to change something from what somebody else said. And so if somebody says, hey, look, I got the perfect translation of this verse. Too bad, we're going to tweak it a little bit. You know, put this in here and that. And quite often, you'll read even in this. The reason I like Stone Tanakh is because the Hebrew is so easy to read. I don't trust English translation. And the only way I can say that is because, you see, if you had an interlinear, word for word, they'll tell you the Strong's number, and they'll tell you what that word basically means, and you can look it up at Strong's. And then on the opposite page of the interlinear, you'll see it English narrative, right? It's just written like we read a verse. And you'll say, wait a second, they've taken the first half of the verse and they flipped it around, or they changed the subject and the object, or the object and the predicate in the verse. How do we know we're reading the same thing? Okay, here's the point. Where is one who counts? Counts what? The word count that they use there is sefer. Samik, pei, resh. That's the word for count. Well, mem nun is also the word for count. But when it says, where's one who will sefer? When it says, where is one who weighs, the word is shekel. Shin kuf lamed. Yeah, does anybody know what the word shekel means?
Money.
It's money, but it also means to weigh.
Wait.
See, the thing is, what they would do is they'd have scales of balance, and they'd put silver on one side, and then it's offset by a certain number of ounces or grams on the other side, right? So silver was used to balance the cost of something, balance scales, and Yahweh hates unjust scales. In other words, a guy will say, well, this is really 5 grams, but I've got this one that I kind of hollowed it out and then sealed it over, and I'm going to use that when a certain guy comes up so I can rip him off, and Yahweh hates that. Why? Balanced scales is mishpat, and he says the foundation of his throne is balanced scales. And he is impartial. You know, the picture of blind justice, the girl with the blindfold holding scales of justice and the sword, that's modeled after some Greek deity, but it's basically a picture of Yahuwah's own personal attitude. He said, this sword, I don't care who you think you are, even if you're David or Moses, if you tip the scales with unjust weights, this sword is on you, period. My throne does not regard who you think you are or what you think your relationship was with me. Balanced scales of just interactions with one another. Not only with each other here, but regarding him too. So when he says something, people talk about being Torah terrorists, and it's like, oh gosh, you know, quit yelling at each other. It's like, no, wait a minute. Why do we even care? Because he cares. So for one person to be zealous about something that he says, and then say, hey man, look, we better do this, and say, hey, get off my back. From what I understand of the Jews, this is not an individual campaign. This is collective. And just like with Achan, he stole something that he wasn't supposed to touch, and he buried it under his tent, and a bunch of guys got killed. What are you doing to the rest of us by what you're doing? And one reason why people become, as they say, Torah terrorists, is for the good of everybody else. There's a reason and a benefit to watch for each other, and it's not just because you think you're better than everybody else. It's like we're all in the same boat. And if somebody's sitting there with an ice pick and punching holes in the boat, and, hey, get off my back, I'm having fun, it's like, you're going to sink us all. This is a collective, and at least the Jews, apparently, from what I understand, have that. Where they say, listen, you don't want to become one of us. Stay away. You got to pound on the door 3 different occasions if they want to even open it up and talk to you. They don't go evangelizing, apparently, from what I hear. I said, why? It's because if you sign up and get in with us, see all these curses? You're going to get them. Why? We just read, who can live with the eternal conflagration? This God is a monster, Yahweh. But our Elohim, he's only a monster when you betray him. But he is this terrible monster. You got to learn how to work with the guy. Where's one who counts? That's the word sefer. As I said the other day, that's like fence posts. And connecting the dots, Abraham was told to sefer the stars. For us to look at these letters, the friend up in Ohio, and he's coined the phrase, basically, we're sephering. We're going to sit here and just look at words and figure out what the meaning. We're sephering. Sefer is the word translated book or scroll. We're sephering. We're connecting the dots. We're trying to figure this out. Where's one who will sefer? We're doing it. And me and Jeff are up here trying to show you that you can do it with Paleo-Hebrew really nice and slick and easy. Man, sephering in Paleo-Hebrew, whoa, the whole thing just opens up. Where's one who weighs? Put the stuff in the scales. What did he say? What did we inherit? What are we doing? What's out of balance? How am I living my life? And then it says, where's one who counts the towers? The word towers, migdalim. It's just the big stuff, the important stuff. Whether it's an actual fortress, whether it's an actual important man, it's important stuff. Is there anybody anywhere that'll take a look at the important stuff? Yeah, that's what we're doing. But how many other people are doing it? Question over here. Not working.
Hello?
Oh,
There we go. Yeah, I just wanted to say what you were talking about, the place where the fellow went and he stole the stuff and buried it under his tent. Just for me personally, that's been one of the most amazing revelations. But like you say, one that a lot of people doesn't want to hear. That what I'm doing in my private life, in my personal life, like especially when I'm by myself, is going to affect my brothers and sisters. Or you say, am I my brother keeper? Like you said, the guy that was poking holes in the boat. I mean, that's absolutely and totally true, because it's the principal law of the law of reaping and sowing that Paul laid down in Galatians chapter 6, where he says, do not be deceived, God will not be mocked. Whatever a man sows, this shall he also reap. If you're, whether it's, in broad daylight in front of 50,000 people, or if it's by yourself, you're going to reap it back.
Absolutely.
And before you enter,
Yes.
please make sure to put your contact information on the board so everybody here can find you after today.
Sure. Okay, just so you know, again, this is question and answer, but it's also, you don't have to ask a question, you can give a comment, like, if you have something to say, please feel free. In other words, this isn't you coming here to hear me, this is speaking with each other. So does anybody else have anything along the subject line that you want to contribute? Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say that when Paul makes that statement of a sound mind, Paul knows Hebrew.
Sure.
So that's another thing that we can look at too.
Okay, let me just say this about that. Just so you know, Paul probably spoke different language, Aramaic, probably Greek, probably. How do we know whether Paul wrote anything in Hebrew or had even regarded Hebrew? Well, there's one place, I heard a guy on the radio talk about this. He said, Paul said, we will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. You go, in English, sleep, okay, you wrap your mind around that concept, and change, well, okay, why would Paul say that? Well, he's talking about the rapture, us being transfigured. Wait a minute, it's a Hebrew riddle. The word sleep and change is shana, which is shin, nun, hey. Rosh Hashanah is the new year, the change of the year, so the shana. But remember I said Lashon means different variants, shin, vav, nun? It's the same root. It's got a sheen and a nun. The vavs and yods are like wild cards that you stick in between the other consonants. That's just one way the language works. So when you have a sheen or nun, it's like teeth, and it's changed, but it's also sleep. Because when you sleep, when you're awake, you're up and about, doing this and that, and then when you sleep, you're like a whole different person. Does it change? Wake up, add it again. So what I'm saying is that he was making a Hebrew, what do you call it, a double entendre or something?
Word pun.
Word pun. Which is proof he was talking about Hebrew stuff there. So Paul was explaining things by seeing things in the Hebrew and saying, hey, look. So one thing I found is that once you start picking through text, you'll find stuff. For example, I can in the dictionary, I'll look at one word that's got half a dozen different meanings. And one of those meanings they chose to drop into the translation. And then you read another word, a completely different word like this, and you look at it, half a dozen different meanings, and hey, wait a minute, that one matches that one. It's like playing the game concentration with cards, you flip them up and try to find. And then sometimes in one text it's all over the place many times. And so some of the notes that I have, I've got all these arrows, this is referring to that, connecting that, and the whole thing opens up as this giant puzzle or this game that you can't see in English. Another comment there.
Yeah, my comment kind of goes back to what he was talking about, what you had mentioned before about the poking holes in the boat. I have noticed in this movement that people are getting too focused on individuality and their personal relationship with God, which is very important. I'm not diminishing that. But also when you look through the scriptures, you see over and over again how we're called to be one people. Even Yeshua's prayer, our Father who art in heaven. And there's a group concept like you were talking about. So yes, we have a responsibility to hold each other accountable, but we need to use wisdom so that we're not just tearing each other apart over picking fingernails. Sometimes situations are picking fingernail and we're acting like somebody's poking holes in the boat. So we need to use wisdom as to when to approach something, how to bring it up so that there's actually edification and a maturing of the body instead of a tearing each other down that has no benefit.
I heard a guy speaking on a sermon once, I think it was an SDA church, they gave me the tape years ago. He said there's one word in Scripture, and it was in Hebrew, I didn't know any Hebrew, I'd never heard this word before. There's one word which most clearly expresses Yahweh's heart about everything. This is the one, if there's one word out of the entire language which expresses his heart. Does anybody know that word?
Unity.
Excuse me? It's not unity, the word is chesed. You know what that means?
Loving kindness.
Tender, loving kindness, which expresses itself in mercy. It's a het, somic, dalet. I could sit here and spend much time with you analyzing the meaning of every letter and the two pairs of letters and the three and the prefixes and suffixes, and it goes on and on, but sorry, we don't have time for that. But I'm just saying, any word, you can sit there and get a notebook and go page after page of studying. This lady I know in Canada, Sigrid, she looked at the word segula, which is treasure. They will be my special treasure. It's like, well, do a word study on treasure, and I tried to give her a little clue as to how, with looking up all the different places that it's found and the different spellings and on and on. And she ended up with this huge study. But inside her, as she was doing the study, it just exploded with insight and deepening her own relationship with him, and she just really lit up for the sake of doing the study on this one word. Yes, somebody else got a, yes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the message you're bringing. You struck me that God has given you a gift as a Joshua to lead his people to victory, specifically by defeating fear. And what I want to reflect on is, and ask you about, is to coach us a little more on this, because somebody said Jesus said, do not fear, like, I don't know if they said 28 times, but we know he said it a bunch. Here's my question. Jesus would never put to us a moral test we couldn't achieve. If it must be within our power to will to defeat fear and not fear. So would you give us some coaching? You're telling us the same thing Jesus did. Don't fear, fear's your enemy, here's why. Would you please tell us, Brother Eric?
Sure.
Talk to us a little bit about that, and then I do have a question about biliteral versus triliteral roots, but this is the crux right here.
Okay. I forgot to hand these out yesterday. I handed them out to some people. I've got a bit of them here. People can, whoever wants them. You want to hand them out? Sorry, I don't have enough for everybody, but I can send you guys a care package if you want and send some other stuff. Let me show you what's on here. Jeff uses a different font, but this is my font in the Paleo, and I can explain that. That's a different subject, but the modern, the Sophite letters, and here's that Mishkan pattern. In Hebrew's written right to left, but we read left to right. So here's that word I was talking about yesterday, John 1:1, that mysterious word by which everything else was made, pronounced Abba Gada Hava Zachati Kavamana Sakafas Karashta, which is just articulating the alphabet as if it was a word. That's all that is. And color-coded so you'll see it. Okay. There's my Erictology. If you look up Erictology on the internet, you'll find there's probably 200-300 hours worth of stuff that people have put up. Then like this, if you guys want to put it on the internet, on YouTube, go ahead. I don't have a particular site where you can find stuff. There is a website, paleosefer.com, S-E-P-H-E-R, but I don't interface with it. I don't put a bunch of stuff in there. There's a few things on there, and it's like, I just don't have the time, and a friend put it up, and I don't have the knowledge or the skill or it's beyond my scope, sorry. But this is my email. Now, you flip this over, there's an alphabet song. Here, I'll sing it for you real quick. I'm getting to your question, which is this picture down here. That's why I'm showing you this. Brad Groman did an alphabet song on the internet. You can find it. It's done to the tune of Do, Re, Mi. He takes the simple meanings of the letters. Aleph, an ox, a big strong ox. Bet, a house for us to live. Gimel, the camel, travel, storm. Door for us to enter in. It goes like that. Anyway, mine's a little different. It's deep, almost esoteric. I use a lot of Hebrew words, but it's made dippity-dappity, to the tune of itsy-bitsy spider. Because it's incremental, like a little kids thing. And each letter is incremental. I use a bunch of Hebrew words because if you learn these Hebrew words, most of them are the basic main words, like Shema, Shomer, together one. And if you understand the meanings of the letters, That's what they're about. Okay, now, beneath this, I have this picture. One of the things I've tried to do is make graphics, little simple graphics about his stuff. And it's about words. It's not about the picture necessarily, but it's about words. This right across, it says Altira. Does anybody know what the most often repeated commandment is in the entire Scripture? It's repeated more than any other commandment, and that's what it is. But does anybody know what that means?
Fear Yah. To fear the Most High.
This word Aleph Lamed, if it's flipped around in Lamed Aleph, it means no. So Aleph Lamed in the dictionary can mean a motion toward something, and that's translated El, meaning God or most high, but that's El Elyon is most high. But anyway, the point is, but it can also mean the negative, meaning don't do it. And so you could look at that and say, well, how do you know if it means motion toward or stay away? It's one of those words that means both, and it's just a simple two-letter word. This is the command that you're asking about. Don't fear. Tira. Yirah, Yod Resh Aleph, is where we get the word for fear, reverence, or terror. But anyway, that's another study of analyzing if he says lo tira or al tira. But anyway, this is the most often repeated commandment. Why did I draw the picture like this? It's an oven door, and inside is teeth and fire. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, those are the Babylonian names, they were thrown into the oven, and they said, if Yahweh wants us burned up, we'll burn up, and if not, that's up to him. And he preserved them in the flames. They had to have this stable disposition. Daniel, when he was thrown into the teeth, like the black outline of teeth here, it's like, my Elohim is capable of preserving me, and if not, that's his business. I'm on his clock. If he wants me here to do something, I'll do it. If he doesn't, if it's time to punch out, I'll punch out. There's a little tiny gray stick figure of a guy standing here like this. The other interesting thing, you can't tell if it's facing forward or backwards or whatever, but somehow we're supposed to just stand here and say, Yahweh, Ani Lagodi Vegodi Li. I'm my beloved is mine. To just stand there with that countenance, that's our regard. And so the thing about teeth and fire, both of those are the meaning of the letter Shin. This letter right here. Drawing it like this in the Paleo, Jeff uses a font that looks more like that. Kind of round, but I use the W shape because they like these fangs. Shin literally is where we get the word shiny, like teeth, and it's also where we get the word difference of variance, dental work like teeth, but it also means that which consumes, like fire, and it's the single letter which is used as the monogram, the one mono, singular, gram, writing, of El Shaddai. And Shaddai is spelled Shin Dalet Yod, and you see the dictionary, El Shaddai is defined as the Almighty, which is this powerful that nothing can come against, but also the provider of all benefits. So it's the one who's the source of provision and the one who is so outrageously destructive that nobody's got nothing against him. And for us to get it, that we're standing with him at our back, or we're even facing him, what have we to fear? So we have to intellectualize and have it in our heart, working together according to our belief, because he said so. So there's a couple interesting stories. One is a 1,000,000-man army was coming against Jerusalem. Think how long it would take to train 1,000,000 young men. You have to give birth to probably at least another 1,000,000 young women, right? And then they have to be taught, they have to be exercised to get up gear for war. Somebody's got to manufacture all the arms, grow all the food, make all the equipment, get all the cattle, put them on carts, and muster this 1,000,000-man army to Jerusalem. And the governors of Jerusalem, I think this is in 2 Chronicles, they appealed to Yahweh and they said, we deserve this. We've completely messed up. We're in big trouble. We deserve what's coming, but you're our only help. Will you please save us? And Yahweh basically said, yes, that's all I needed to hear. And he turned and he sent mice to eat the leather and the strings and the fabrics overnight, and all their gear fell on the ground, and this million-man army cut and ran. And all that provision had just been handed to his people. All the work, all the intention, all the effort of that enemy, if his people hadn't turned and regarded him in a confident expectation of his provision as their mighty champion El Shaddai, I fully believe we'd have a different regarding of history, and they would have been turned upside down like every other siege against Jerusalem, like the Babylonians or Turks or British or whoever that has ruined the place. But because they turned their hearts, please Yahweh, thank you, we're yours, you are ours. Numerous stories throughout Scripture where Yahweh has Saul and Jonathan there was 2 swords in the entire army. There was enough of the enemy, they filled the entire valley more than you could count, like the sand of the sea. Might have been 600,000, might have been 1,000,000. Armed to the teeth and furious, raging, we're going to do this, we're going to take your... Saul and Jonathan had 2 swords. Their army was disappearing. That's when Saul went ahead and did the sacrifice, and Samuel showed up the next day and said, Saul, you just blew it. Jonathan and his armor bearer went up to this mountain. There's a garrison, and they said, look, Yahweh willing, we'll prevail, and otherwise we got nothing anyway. So let's see. If they say, hey, come on up here, you dirty rats, we'll teach you. Then he's giving them into our hands. But if they say, stay there, we're going to come get you, let's get out of here, you know. So they just was that the Ruach speaking, or did that in their own mind? The point is, they said, Yahweh, what are you doing? And the people said, come on up here. They said, we got this is ours. Jonathan and his armor bearer came up there, and they took over, they overwhelmed the entire garrison. It might have been 20 guys or something. And then it says in Scripture, there was almost like this wave of impact that rushed down the mountain and hit the camp. And Yahweh turned that entire enemy camp of maybe 1,000,000 guys into a frenzy. They went berserk, and they started killing each other. And then Saul and the 600 guys goes, what's going on? Oh, well, let's go take advantage of the situation. And they came in, and guess what? Now they're armed. Now they have a fully armed army. They didn't have to metalsmith or mine the ore. Yahweh uses our enemies to provide for us. Yep. Somebody read the other day that I think David said something about that the enemy's going to set a trap, and Yahweh's going to make them fall in it. We have to have a confidence that his words are true and that he spoke them. There's another verse he says, it's not for nothing that I called Jacob and gave him my stuff. You think that I would tell him promises and say, forget it? It's not for nothing that I gave my words to my people. But we were told it was for nothing. Oh, you can't. You never were supposed to. It was just to prove that you were incapable. Anyway, somebody else has raised hands. We're almost out of time. Yes?
Yeah. Well, back about 6 topics ago. One of the things, this passage in Isaiah 33:18, if you guys remember back to 9/11, this was the favorite text.
Oh, it
a lot
was?
of country preachers, they get up there and say, oh yeah, it was, the towers and all this kind of stuff. But the problem is it's just taken completely out of context because it matches something that we're thinking about at that moment. And that's not a fair way to interpret Scripture. So I will give you guys a cheating little easy way to interpret a verse like this. And that is, it's the partis.
It's what?
Partis,
PRDS.
Yeah, and you start there with the basic superficial meaning of the entire passage. And in this case, it's several chapters of Isaiah. You got to figure out what's going on there, what he's talking about, because this verse is going to fit into the overall thing that he's talking about. And then you look at the Remez, and then finally we're always down there on the soda trying to figure out this deep meaning to this verse, this passage, especially when it seems to apply to something that we're aware of right now. But what we have to do, if we're trying to figure out this meaning of this verse, is all these different levels of interpretation have to agree. They can't contradict each other. All right? So This is a cheating way to do it. Is just figure out what that entire passage of the Bible is about. And you already know, to a big degree, what this verse is going to be about, because it fits right into it. You see what I'm saying? And that way, it saved me, when I began to figure this out, it saved me so many word searches, so many hours of chewing and beating myself up, because I already knew to a big degree what it was about. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Okay.
Just for what it's worth, it'll save you so many hours. It's like, wait a minute, there's no time clock that any of us take into account of. If you could chew your food and take 10 minutes, because I don't want to swallow this, it tastes so good, and this is my last bite on the plate. Like a nice steak or something, right? Or a good carrot, you know. You don't have to be in a hurry. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Sometimes I've sat there and spent months on trying to figure out one word, just pondering, mulling, chewing the cud, as it were. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you learn the whole dictionary, or if you can write a book like Jeff or Isaac Moseson or something. It's like, speaking of which, Isaac Moseson has a lot of good stuff, though he hates the paleo. Just so you know, he hates the paleo, but he's got this great book called Origin of Speeches. He has another book called The Word, where 20,000 English words derive right out of Hebrew. It's really fascinating. Anyway, somebody else had a hand up.
Nobody else wants it. I always was taught that Hebrew was a triliteral root language with biliteral exceptions. Are you reversing that?
No. It's a three-letter verb root. Brad Scott talks about that. But some people say, well, yeah, you can look at two. What I'm saying is that if you look at it letter by letter, you can interpret the letters and then collect them. Then you use the red dictionary is that you look at every two-letter root. So I look at every word starting with those two letters, or those two letters are somewhere in the word, and that's gets really big. But the verb roots are three-letter. But for example, and this is the problem with the three-letter root, they translate tabernacle of David as Sukkot, meaning plural of sukkah, samet kaf hey. So now you're saying the tabernacle is this tent. Well, that's an ohel, or maybe it's Mishkan, like Moshe had. Those are different words. Maybe it's a bet, like this house. It's like, wait a minute. It's spelled Sukkot, Samet Kaf Tav. Well, yeah, but we know that the three-letter root is supposed to be Samet Kaf Hey, and Strong's will tell you, well, the Tav is this inferred plural that was really coming out of that. So Strong's is going to translate it by Samet Kaf Hey. But you look in the Red Dictionary, and Samet Kaf Tav means listening. And then I can compare the verb listening to the design of the sukkah, and then take the word David, this is what I was talking about yesterday, which is beloved, and there's a hand in there, the yod, and so it's like walking hand in hand, because a yod and a vav, there's a dalet vav, yod dalet. A vav is shaped like this, and a yod is shaped like that, and it's like, well, it's like train coupling devices, so two hands holding each other of their beloved interlaced fingers having to do with listening. Now that's like communication, mouth to ear, walking hand in hand. That's the Sukkot of David that I can see in the pictures. Yes?
I just wanted to I just want to make a quick statement that there's a dichotomy that I'm hearing you talking about with the way that the Father is. And I think the verse that really depicts that very well is that Yahuwah is a sun and a shield at the same time. He's a sun to the wicked, because his blazing hot glory is burning. Okay? But he's a shield to the righteous, because he's got us under this umbrella shade, and he's protecting us, and we get refreshing.
Exactly. And so what I'm saying is, what he is to us, whether he's this blazing El Shaddai of mighty terror, or whether he's the provider of all benefits like the shade, is up to us and our attitude about listening to his words. Somebody else had their hand up real quick. Yes?
Yeah, I was going to say that, your answer to her was twofold. It was one, the Hebrew, and the reality of it, and learning it was a big help to you, and I agree. The Hebrew is amazing, and I'm still barely learning, even after all these years. But your other part of the message was a story from the Bible, and the Father has given us countless, all through the Bible,